Hello, my name's Marcus,
I'm Fionn.
and you're listening to the Recovery Hub podcasts,
Knowing the Score with Eternal Media.
a drug education and alcohol education series of podcasts.
This is a co-production between Eternal Media, Meddwl Ymlaen, Mind Our Future, and North Wales Area Planning Board.
What do you do, Carlos?
So I am a project manager who works for the venture, and we're delivering a mental health project alongside the Young Leaders Advisory Board.
And Ryan, thanks for coming.
No problem.
So Ryan is going to interview me. We had a training evening and we workshopped a ton of questions that the guys would like the answer to about drugs, kind of stuff they don't really teach in schools because they don't work with people in recovery. Ryan, what do you hope to get from your interview with me?
Basically, just a background information of what's gone on and how it affected you and how to get where you are now.
So are you feeling the weight of your generation on your shoulders? Because you're asking questions for potentially. Maybe that was a good title as well, Clueless. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm all yours.
Okay. So what was school life like for you?
I did pretty well at school up until probably 14. Kind of grade A, top sets. And I think in all schools there's bullying, right? And I don't think anybody in my school or the junior school or the infant school was immune from bullying. And you've asked a question I ask everybody, what was school like for you? I felt different. I think everybody does feel different at school. And I think we do what we can to try and fit in. But up until the age of 14, I was very well behaved, really. And then I noticed that the cool kids were getting in trouble at school. The kids that got on the school roof, the kids that mucked about, the kids that got into detention, they had a cool status, and I really wanted that. So I started mucking about. I started getting on the roof. I started getting in trouble, and because I was chasing that cool factor. But school was hard. Yeah.
What made it hard?
I think it might be harder today, because of phones and stuff, you're never away from it. At least at school, if you're getting bullied or if you're getting a hard time with somebody, it kind of ends after you walk home. That's kind of it for the day, at least. But what was hard about it for me, trying to fit in, feeling different, always feeling like not part of, the acceptance thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, people are always trying to fit in, but then they want to be different at the same time. So I get where you're coming from with that. So yeah, I mean, school life is hard as it is. So trying to fit in, be with popular kids and know that you'll never really fit in because you're not naughty enough or you're not cool enough or whatever. So I was like that sometimes, but it's better to be different than to be like everyone else. Otherwise, if everyone was the same, the world would be boring.
For sure, I felt that if I was different, kids are mean. They just pick on difference, and that's only because I only know it now. I didn't know it then, but that's only so people don't look at their differences, so they focus on other people's, and nothing's changed, has it?
No.
Did you ever bully anybody?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
It felt fantastic. That sounds really mean, but I bullied a kid that had bullied me terribly. I went to a farmer's school. I was a townie, and because my parents had a business and they knew farmers, they kind of packed me off for the farmers, which was fine. I enjoyed the farming community, but the kids really picked on me in that farming school because I was a townie. And there was one other townie there. We just clung to each other because we were just getting beat up every day. We were like, honestly, we had a really tough time of it. And that's really young, right? And even back then, I didn't want to tell my parents or anything. I felt kind of ashamed that people are bullying me kind of thing. So I didn't tell anybody. Those kids later on ended up in my comprehensive school. So I got my own back. So at the time, with a 14-year-old head, it felt like vengeance, like justice. He turned out to be quite a horrible person.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, so it felt like payback, like karma.
I can see that. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I still have a problem with bullies today. You know, I see people being bullied. I can't let it go. I have to kind of stop it. I have to make, I can't. It's a big, injustice is a big one.
What was your home life like for you?
I had a good home life, really. It was 2 parents that were celebrated in the end, their 50th wedding anniversary. I grew up in a small welding company business. Home life was, apart from my sister that kept trying to kill me, I really liked it. It was always a busy house. We always had people coming and going. I haven't got any complaints or anything from home life. I felt loved. I felt like I wasn't spoilt, but I didn't want for anything either. Because if I wanted something, I could go to my dad's factory and go and earn some money to go and do it. So I feel like I had a great childhood in that way.
And did you say you've got a sister, was it?
I've got a sister and a brother. We all get on now. Brother's quite a bit older than me, and he's an amazing guy. And then my sister is as well, and she. We get on really well nowadays, but we didn't for so long because there's only 2 years between us, and we just, I think my sister's name's Annette. I think she taught me a lot of my survival skills at a very young age.
Yeah, I see. Mm-hmm. Did you ever think addiction would happen to you?
Who does? Who ever thinks that can happen to you? It's the old cliche, it won't happen to me. But then it does. Nobody thinks it'll happen to them. But it does every day. And it's not drug dealers that get you hooked, it's your mates.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had a drug pushed on me.
So last question of this first bit. Does addiction run in the family?
I think addiction can run in families. I also see that, I'm not talking about my family, I also see that people who, like parents that are addicted, we've interviewed the sons and daughters of people in addiction, once they're grown up, and they've gone one or two ways. They've gone like, because they've been around drugs all their life, it just felt natural and they went into the addiction themselves, or because they saw how it took their parents and what it did to them, they were totally anti-drugs. So, yes and no.
What was your drug of choice?
My drug of choice was heroin in the end.
How come?
The progression was... So my drug education at school consisted of our year sat on the sports hall floor, cross-legged, probably about 14 years old, and an old hippie woman got on stage, big flowery dress, big grey hair, kind of lovely lady, and she pulled out a fishing box and opened the fishing box and had lots of little compartments in, and she pulled out plastic drugs. So plastic cannabis, this is cannabis, this is what it looks like, don't take this. This is LSD, don't take this. This is amphetamines, don't take this. And she went through, everything and showing us the plastic drugs that we shouldn't take. And she didn't tell us why we shouldn't take, apart from it'd kill us. So at that point, we're getting the message from school, from the hippie lady, from the local drug team, all telling us that drugs would kill us. We also had Grange Hill and a character on there called Zamo, who became like the token drug addict in the school. So we got to see, what happened to him. And then there's a song that included them, and Nancy Reagan's message was just say no. And in our school, we were all saying yes. So I can remember the first time I took a drug. Well, in my book, alcohol is a drug. So, we used to go to the under 18s disco and drink and that. And back then I needed it. I couldn't relax unless I'd had something. I couldn't go and socialise. Quite an introvert, really. And, going back to what we spoke about earlier, acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah. I found that helped me to integrate and be a part of and relax. And, the anxiety levels coming down when I had something. And I couldn't really relax until I did. And I'd even have a drink before I met people to kind of get rid of that social anxiety that crippled me back then, really. Because, we all think we're different back at that age, not in a good way. So I can remember taking cannabis for the first time at a friend's mum's house in Scotland when I was 14. She'd left for the day and told us not to go downstairs because there was a dealer living downstairs. First thing we did was go and knock on this guy's door. We were actively seeking it out, really. He invited us in and gave us a hot knife, which was a way to take cannabis, and it took our throats out. It absolutely ripped our throats apart, but we got high. It was very funny, and it was a lot of fun, and we really enjoyed it. And that was the point where I realised the establishment lied to me. Drugs didn't kill you. I've just taken drugs. It didn't kill me. So that was a gateway for me. Cliche again, cannabis was a gateway drug. It was for me. I know it's not for a lot of people. It was for me. Once I realised drugs didn't kill me, and they're a lot of fun, because drugs were fun, or I wouldn't have done them the second time. There was a time where drugs weren't fun and they became hell, but they were for a while. So that was the first time I took something.
What did your drugs do for you?
Drugs are cool. That's the problem. If we could take cool out of drugs, I think there'd be a lot less young people wanting to try it. If the only place you could take drugs was on a geriatric ward in hospital, it's the only place you could ever take it, that's the only place you could get, people wouldn't be on it. There would be, if we could take the cool out of drugs, I think we would have won half the battle if people wanted to try it. But I can remember being that age and how cool I felt because I'd had cannabis. So it felt like I'd gone up in social circles because I'd done something that was taboo and that not many other people had done. What did it do for me? It made me laugh a lot. It made me empty the fridge. It allowed me to be a part of a group of people that also did that. So then I had my little clan, being a part of something, the acceptance thing. So it helped me to integrate, I guess.
How did you feel once you started the drugs? Did you feel popular again? Did you join with the cool kids, or?
That's it. It does. It did. When you're just starting something and it feels like you've discovered it, and like you're the first person to ever have it, kind of thing, and none of your other peers are doing it. It's like you're the first person doing it out of a lot of you and a few other people. Yeah, at first, you do brag about it and stuff. Later on, you don't. But in the beginning, it does feel quite cool. It feels quite special. It feels very taboo, and that you shouldn't do it. Oh, this is risky, that risky feeling. It's quite exciting.
Mm-hmm. I see, yeah. So how did you start then?
After the initial try with cannabis at 14 in Edinburgh, I didn't do it for quite a long time because I didn't know where to find it from at 14 in my town. It'd be different nowadays, I guess, but back then it wasn't ready, it wasn't as readily available. So it might have been a year or something later since I started again. Well, and I started and I didn't stop. It became that I had to have one to wake up with. So from very quickly, having a smoke with my friends and it being a social thing, I was still doing that, but I was also having it when I woke up, and then I was having it at 10:30 break, and I was having it at lunchtime, and I was having it at afternoon break, and I was having it when I got home, and I had it before I went to sleep. So very quickly I was on it, and I was addicted to cannabis back then, mentally.
So you said that you were emptying the fridge. How did that change you?
Yeah, I mean, emptying the fridge was one of them. So I guess we're getting into more of the addiction stage of things now with how drugs changed me. There was a progression. So if alcohol was my first kind of thing, and then maybe a bit of gas on the playground at school and, in lunch break, and cigarettes, the progression. And then it was, after cannabis, it was acid, and that was crazy. And then amphetamines. And then we found clubbing. We found the Manchester warehouse scene, and we found raving in the early days when even ecstasy didn't exist then. It was just something for marriage guidance counsellors to have. We used to do acid, and we used to do amphetamine and go out on the clubbing scene, Manchester, the warehouses, before it really exploded in about 1988, 89 kind of thing. And then I remember ecstasy coming on the scene around 1990. And it was a summer of love. It was like everything changed from a really kind of weird, trippy environment that was amphetamine fueled. It turned overnight pretty much into like a summer of love. Everyone loved up, loving each other, which I just absolutely loved. And I lived for the weekends. So it changed me at that point. I was totally focused on my Friday night, my Saturday night, and my Sunday come down with friends. And again, it was taboo, and it was only a select group of friends that I had that would even come and do it. And they're a bit older, so that felt cooler as well, doing it with older people that could drive and stuff like that. And cool went up again. And we used to hit the scene really hard and go out on a Friday and not come back till a Sunday, just been amphetamine up and on ecstasy and just a very high stimulant level. And we used to take things like sleeping pills that we got off a mate who worked for Security Corps to try and come down on it. It was all very messy, and going to come down parties and smoking ourselves down on cannabis and all the paranoia that goes along with that. It felt really dirty, really horrible. In 1991, we went to a Technodrome rave up in Scotland. And it was a weekender, circus tents, big play things, haystacks and that kind of thing. We took some E's up and we sold them to pay for the weekend. We were paying a tenner down here and we're getting like 25 quid up there. So it's just to pay for our expenses. And we got busted on the way back by the police. Our dealer grassed us up and we got boxed in at like 4 a.m. on a Monday morning. And I was 17. My mate was 17. And the two older mates, they were 20. By the time court came around, we were all a year older. And a girl had just died, I think it was Copper's daughter, I think it was Leah Betts. And the judge was throwing the book at people. We all got caught with 4 E's each or 3 E's each and a bit of whiz. And we got a year each. And it was our first offence. And it was young offenders for me and my mate. And it's the most violent place I've ever been to. It was just fighting every day. Just people ending up in the hospital wing. I ended up in the hospital wing. It's just incredibly violent. My two other friends, the older ones, they went to Walton Prison in Liverpool. They were over 21, so they went in something called cons. We drew a line in the sand before we went in. The hardest we'd ever go would be cocaine. Heroin is absolutely taboo. We'd never, ever do heroin. Never, never, never. Made a pact, we'd never do it. Me and my mate came out of young offenders. The other two lads came out of cons. And nothing had changed. We still wanted to go partying and stuff the minute we got out, and we did. And they kept disappearing. The two older ones, they kept disappearing. We wanted to know why. And went around to the house one night when we meant to go to the pub. And they're running something up and down the foil, like a brown liquid substance, and sucking it in with a little metal tube made out of tinfoil. We kind of had a good idea what it was, but we went in and they tried to hide it. So what are you doing? And they said they're doing cannabis oil. We knew it wasn't. I was disgusted because I knew what it was. I thought, right, go in the pub. Come on, Nathan, come on, let's go. And mate Nathan, like, he was inside. He grade A student. He was going places. Had a job with Brunnermond, ICI Chemicals. He had his head screwed on. Hardest kid in our year, dead cool. He was really, really, he was, a lot of people looked up to him, kind of thing. He had a go, and I thought, well, if Nathan's having a go, it can't be that bad. I had a go as well, because Nathan did. Nathan never had it again. I never stopped for 25 years. So at that point, heroin took over everything very quickly. It changed me in ways that would take me through 25 years of hell. Homelessness, more prison sentences. And I don't come from that, but, you spoke about my childhood. It's like, it's not something I was groomed to go and do. It's like, it's like where we end up in addiction. It's just where we end up, because the addiction is so expensive. You have to do things that you wouldn't do if you weren't in addiction. The crime that comes along with it. It just comes hand in hand. Crime, addiction, homelessness turned me into a criminal. That's what it did. It turned me into a stereotypical street homeless addict for decades. Pulled out of toilets. If you've watched Train Spotting, that I was quite tame I got it. A lot of that stuff happened to me, but I was thinking, it's kind of, that was my life for a long time. Killed me a couple of times. It is the slowest form of suicide known to man.
Yeah. So what kind of person did you become?
I don't think I was a person anymore. I just existed. I can imagine people listening to this at a younger age. That'll never happen to me. I can just hear myself if I was listening to this when I was 14. Yeah, but that'll never happen to me. I'll never let it go that far. Because I said those same things. I'm not going that far. There was one or two addicts in our town, and we were like, oh my God, they're heroin. And I remember how I felt about them. And I became that. But I remember saying that will never happen to me. And I guess if people take anything from this podcast, it's that I said that, and it did happen to me, and it happens to everybody. I think the percentage is something like 95% of people who try heroin will become addicted. And I know nobody thinks they'll ever try heroin at that age, but the progression, if I start at 14, and you don't go straight on heroin. There's always cigarettes, alcohol, there's a progression up. So each next step doesn't seem very much. Mm-hmm. But if you went from cigarettes to heroin, it'd be like, well, you're not going to do that, obviously. So it's all these little steps you take along the road to where you end up. Ketamine as well, and it all does the same thing. It just destroys you. So the kind of person I became was quite subhuman.
Did you ever feel like you were existing to other members, or you just keep yourself to yourself?
In the early days, it was a social thing. I'd go and pick a mate up I worked with a mate, and we call it Friday Special. We'll get the work van, and it's probably about 18, 19 years old. And we go up to the next town, buy some heroin, go and find somewhere pretty and just smoke it. And so it was a social thing, really. And in the beginning, it was social. In the end, I did everything to avoid any kind of humanity. It was very much heroin took everything. I call it heroin, but it could be any of the other drugs that I listed, mm-hmm. or unlisted. I could replace the word heroin with that. It's just that heroin's my thing, and heroin sounds very hard to somebody who's young, but you could replace that with ketamine. You could replace that with what we imagine is softer. You can replace that with cannabis, because I know plenty of people that have gone down the same road as me on what is perceived to be softer drugs. Yeah, in the end, I was just left with heroin. There was nothing else left. So it takes everything. Addiction takes everything. It takes your job, your family, your friends, your partner, your home, your self-respect, your confidence, your health, your dignity, your pride. You are left with yourself in whatever state that is, and your drug, and that is it. It's very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very lonely place to be.
At times, did you ever feel like yourself? At times, did you ever feel like yourself?
Did I feel like myself in addiction?
Mm-hmm.
No, I'd lost myself. I didn't know who myself was. In fact, one of the things after 25 years, when I've done a few rehabs, lots of detoxes and all the other armies of counsellors over the years. And one of the things I had to do was figure out who I was, because I knew who I was as an addict, and it wasn't worth knowing. It's just all the self-loathing and all these negative feelings of just wishing for death.
Mm-hmm.
And people saying to, "Oh, you carry on doing that, Marcus, you're going to die." I think, and in the back of me, I'm going, "Good. I want to die. I want this to be over." Because in my town where I grew up, nobody got clean. You became alcoholic, or you died. Like, there weren't rehabs. There wasn't recovery. They were for like rock stars. It's only rock stars that kind of went there. So threatened with death was never a consideration, and in fact, I quite would have liked it. And I remember friends who died. Oh, it sounds really bad now. I remember friends who were pulled out of toilets and who had overdosed and died. And I remember feeling jealous that they found a way out. That was where my life was. That I was jealous of people who had died because I didn't know how to live. So I didn't recognise myself. And I didn't know who I was out of addiction. And I didn't know addiction. I didn't know recovery was even possible. I just thought, this is it. This is my life. So getting to know myself, that took a long time.
Because it sounds like you went through this period of not knowing who you are or anything else.
Yeah. I went through I didn't care who I was. I just knew I was an addict, and that was enough. You're an addict, it's all that's down for you. Carry on with your crime. Carry on with the chaos you're causing. Because this is the way it is. There is no way to get out of this.
How long were you addicted for?
Depends where we're counting our addiction from. I guess because we're talking about drugs, but I can trace it back further, right? I can trace it back to food. Before it was substances, I think it was food. I think food was my first addiction, and I think that's the one I'm left with. Addiction doesn't go away, it just changes from what I can see, but they're a healthy addiction. Some people call it disease of obsession rather than addiction, and some people, kind of like myself really, that the further they get away from their drug of choice, the more they realise their addiction didn't have a lot to do with drugs. It was the obsession really of filling that hole in the soul. And so I was addicted to heroin for 25 years, solid, with no days off. Didn't get Christmas Day off. I didn't get my birthdays off. I didn't get bank holidays off my addiction. Solid 24/7.
Was the first couple of years fun?
No.
So there's no point you think this is fantastic?
No, not on heroin. The early days of heroin, right? It was a buzz. But I use it as a tool as well. It's like a silver bullet to amphetamines, and you got your head in a bass bin in a speaker all night, and you're coming out of the club and your head's buzzing, and you've got the stimulant buzz going on, and your mates are there, and you're in a car park. And you don't want the night to end. You go and find a rave after that, and then when it starts getting really messy, and you just want it to stop. You run out of stimulants. You run out of everything, and at that point, heroin was like a fire switch on the side of my head that just turned all that off. It was the silver bullet, and that's what was attractive. But I didn't stop there. Yeah, okay. It wasn't fun like party drugs are fun. It wasn't like clubbing fun. It was a come down from clubbing, used as a tool. That fire switch to turn the madness of the night off, like use it as a tool. But then instead of going out Friday, Saturday, Sunday, we'd end up taking heroin on a Friday instead of going out. And then that crept into a Saturday. And then all of a sudden it's happening on a Tuesday. We're down the back lanes in the back of the cars and, you know, we're taking heroin and there's no clubbing involved anymore. And then I can remember going down I was delivering for my dad like metal pieces down south. And I had to leave really early, like 4 a.m, with a truck full of product. And I drove down. I felt really ill. I felt clammy. I felt like shivery. I felt sweaty, like really bad flu. And like feeling a bit sick. And, just all these flu-like symptoms. I came back and stopped off at my mate's Johnny's house. And he was there smoking some. I thought, "Give it a go, that Johnny." And he did. And it all went away. I was well. All the illness, sickness, and there was like a anvil in my stomach that dropped, and I realised I was addicted. That was the point where I realised, and it was, oh shit, I'm hooked, I'm addicted. That was, I can always remember that feeling, how bad that felt. That wasn't fun. That was when it was not fun anymore. The fun runs out really quickly, and you're left with that loneliness. But beyond that, heroin stops working as well. Because in any drug, it could be paracetamol, it could be alcohol, it could be whatever you name, the body's really good at becoming used to things by, we adapt. In environments, different environments, we adapt to whatever. Opiates, which is heroin's a derivative of opiate, they stop working really quickly. That's why they're not a brilliant long-term painkiller. They stop working. So where heroin was making me well again, because I was withdrawing, in the early days, I'd get what's called a gouge. You'd get a nod. You'd feel, it's a cliche, but it did feel like that, kind of wrapped up in a warm blanket kind of thing, comforted, and a bit like the off switch again. Not oblivion, just a really comfortable place to be. But that stops happening. And then you're just left with being ill and well. So as well as I felt this morning, waking up, I'd have to pay £40 to feel that way every morning, just to feel as well as I do now, waking up. But that's the desperation of it as well. You're always chasing being well. You're not really, even when you get to the injecting point, which a lot of people do, just because you're always trying to get something stronger, and because it's so expensive, you're finding more effective delivery systems into your bloodstream. But it stops working, and then it's just, you just pay to be well a few times a day, and that's a really horrible place to be. And I can remember waking up wherever I'd wake up. And another really horrible feeling I had was, even before I opened my eyes in the morning, I'd get that sinking feeling in my stomach, that Groundhog Day sinking feeling, thinking, everything I did yesterday, I've got to do it again today. Or that running around trying to find money, trying to dodge police, trying to, deal or shoplift or do whatever I've got to do to get the money to use, and then to find it and find somewhere to use it. All that running around, I've got to do it all again today. And then the next day, and then the next day. It's a problem with addiction. You've got to do it every day. You don't get your birthday off. You don't get New Year's Day off. You don't get Christmas Day off. There's no special occasions that you get off. You are on it every day for decades. And that's just what you are. That's just where it takes you.
Marcus, do you mind me asking, say you woke up in the morning, at what point in the day would you have your first hit?
As soon as possible. So the more rural areas of North Wales, which most places are, there'd be county lines coming down, like Scousers coming down, or Manx, or people from bigger cities coming down to supply. There might be some from leftover, but that's where the supplies come from, right? So it's not worth, if you're lucky enough to have a bed at that point, it's not worth getting out of bed until your dealer phones you, because what's the point of existing without, why would you wake up and be ill? So you try and sleep as long as possible. Now, if they don't turn their phone on until 5 PM, that's when I'd get out of bed. There was no point. When using your drug is the only purpose of your existence, there's no point to do anything. So when would I get it? My first hit of the day would be as soon as I could get it, because I couldn't save any from the night before. I could try, but there wouldn't be any. I've had £2,000 worth of gear, and it wasn't there the next morning.
So let's say you managed to get your first hit at 12 o'clock midday. Do you have to take a second hit the same day? How do you cope? At what point do you feel like, oh man, I need to take some more of this?
Heroin, like cocaine, are designer drugs. So not like the Gucci kind of design, like a designer item. Designers, they are designed to make you want more. So they have a relatively short half-life. They don't last very long in your system. That's why they're quite popular in jail, because they're untraceable after a couple of days. Heroin anyway. So yeah, you've got to take it a number of times a day. But you want it more than that anyway. You want it as often as you can. Every time you make 10 quid, you're off to the deal, or 20 quid, or a couple of each. Or as soon as you can get it, you'd have more. But yeah, there's a minimum. I mean, I think the average, it's about every 4 hours.
To stay feeling that well feeling that you
just normal, just how you feel now. Just paying. My habit was £300 a day, so that was like over 3 million quid in my addiction. And that takes some, when you're not working, that takes some finding. That's how much that's just the monetary value, without the whole emotional and humanity that's ripped away from you as well. So the answer is as often as you can, minimum every 4 hours. Yeah.
Wow. That's bonkers. Blows my mind.
But then you get bored of heroin as well. And so heroin is your base. My base. That's what I have to exist. I never enjoyed crack, but I had a lot of it. And they went hand in hand for a long time. I could function as a heroin addict. I could stay out of prison. I could stay out of the cells, kind of. I could, I might even be able to hold a bit of a job down on heroin if I could score early enough, and if my boss had a bit of a sense of humour, and because once I took it, I could work all day. It was like I was a machine after I'd taken it. But when crack came in, it's like all bets off. My life just fell apart every time crack came in. There are things I do on crack that I would never do for heroin. As desperate as the things I did for heroin, crack was the next level. That was instant addiction. I can remember it just felt, the first time I took it, is the high. Anything after that, it's like the minute you smoked it in, you inhaled it and held it, and the second, like the millisecond you exhaled, the hit was there. And it only lasted for 3 or 4 seconds, if that. And that's what you were chasing for the next 20 years. Whoa. That's what you were chasing. You never achieved it either. You never achieved that first time. That's the thing about drugs. It's never the first time. And a lot of people end up chasing that first time, and they never get there. But crack's insane. But there are worse things now. It's not methamphetamine. I know. We work with a guy who's on meth, and he said meth was like crack, but just you had that feeling all day, kind of thing.
Have you seen these zombie drugs that's rolling out in America and certain places where people are just like walking the streets and they look like zombies and they're high all day?
Yeah, and I mean, we've got that really with spice as well, haven't we?
I think that's what it might be, spice, yeah.
Because spice is just a generic term for whatever you can mix up in a bucket and cell, really.
Right.
The jail's got a terrible problem with people just mixing up all kinds of chemicals and putting it on a bit of paper and smoking it and calling it spice when it's just not. Yeah, I've seen that.
Concern, really concern.
I tried it once in prison. I didn't enjoy it, and I'm glad I didn't. It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted heroin, and spice wasn't heroin. I didn't have it again.
How did your addiction affect your family?
Oh, wow, that's a heartbreaking question, Ryan. I can imagine, everybody can imagine how their parents would react when they got the news their son or daughter was on heroin.
Mm-hmm.
And how absolutely despairing that would feel for them. And they must have 1,000 questions like, where did they go wrong? How did they get it so wrong? Who's to blame? How did this happen? We must be terrible parents. There must be all of those questions going through their head, blaming themselves and environment or whatever. So I think the initial, it must have been shock. It must have been fear, absolute panic. And I guess once that goes and they're a few years into it, and I guess they probably thought it could be fixed quite easily by seeing a counsellor, or which I did very early on. I think it was, interestingly, that hippie woman that I spoke about being on stage gave me the drug education. 2 years after she gave us that speech, she became my drug and alcohol worker, like officially. I think it was 2 or 3 years later, I was actually seeing her professionally, and she was my community drugs team worker. And she was packing me off with a couple of litres of methadone a week. Well, no, I think it was about a litre. It was 2 big brown bottles of methadone, which is a terrible drug again. It's like the cure is worse than the disease. It's incredibly horrible stuff. So then I had 2 habits. I had methadone. So the difference between the two is if you withdraw for 3 to 5 days off heroin, if you don't take it, and the horribleness to those withdrawals. Methadone you can withdraw for months if you stop. It's just I don't know why they still give it out, but my parents sent me off to the drug and the drug team, and their answer back then was methadone, which didn't work then, it doesn't work now, as far as I can see. After that, it was more counsellors when that didn't work, which of course it didn't. And I went through a whole list of an army of counsellors. In all, counsellors, prison sentences, multiple detoxes. I think it was 4 or 5 rehabs, hypnotism, electric shock therapy. That's that's kind of where you end up. That's scratching at straws, just trying anything. Had an implant of a drug that counteracted heroin. I think it was naltrexone. I had an implant of that, and that was meant to last a year. And it was a fantastic barrier against opiates. You could smoke half the output of Afghanistan and you would not get a hit. I can remember being on Penmaenmawr Beach in my van, which I was living in, after I'd had the implant, crying because I couldn't feel it, and I'd just taken some. So I went and found a dealer that it's called bashing, so cutting his heroin he put a barbiturate in it. So I was still going through the same motions, and barbiturates aren't opiates, so I could feel that, and it felt the same. And then my crack habit went through the roof. So my parents were quite dismayed at that they thought, okay, this is a blocker. He can't take heroin anymore. But my addiction just went in a different direction because we're not sorting the addiction out. It just, okay, well, that doesn't work. Go on to this. And then after a year, when it did subside, I went back onto heroin. They tried everything. They tried everything over the years. What did it do? Ripped them apart. There are many. If you go around your mum's house, your parents' house, and family photos dotted around of christenings or birthdays or birthday parties. I'm not in them. I'm just not in them. I'm just missing. All these. So that's quite noticeable.
Are there any distinctive conversations that stand out to you that you had with your parents back when you may or may not remember, but just curious if there's anything that particularly stands out.
It's always why, and I get that, because if you can put a reason to something, there's a solution. If you can think of, why did that happen, you can figure out a solution. But when you don't know why it is, or you knew the reason why you took it as a 18-year-old, but that does not equate to a 42-year-old. You're not taking the drugs for the reason you started out on. The conversations around it, I don't know, it just felt like just lots of why conversations, really, and like, please stop, and those kind of heartbreaking, and I wasn't immune, I wasn't numb to my family's heartbreak, and I removed myself from my family for a long time. That's why I was on the missing list. I thought I was protecting my family by them not seeing, but really I didn't want them to see how bad I was, and I was protecting my addiction.
Did you ever steal from your family to feed your addiction?
Yeah, that's the first people I steal from, because that's what's available. Yeah, I guess that's the first opportunity you have, really, of stealing. Yeah, purses, dad's wallet, credit cards, forging signatures on checks back then, machinery, whatever I could, jewellery. Yeah, that's just where it took me. It's horrible to think that I could do that, but I did. That's the desperation of the drug. You become somebody unrecognisable. Acts of desperation.
How did your brother and sister react to the news?
Pretty much along the same lines as my parents, really. But they couldn't understand why I couldn't stop either. I guess I couldn't either. Nobody could understand why I couldn't stop, despite how dire my consequences were becoming. Homelessness and prisons and all the hell that goes along with that lifestyle. There was no consequence big enough to make me stop, and nobody can understand why. But that's kind of a definition of an addict as well. You don't stop. You don't know how to, because then you get so far along that you've been taking drugs for so long, you don't know how to stop anymore. You don't remember how not to take drugs. But in those early days, they just wanted me to stop and couldn't understand, and just trying to hide it from them as best as possible all the time.
Did your brother and sister ever dabble in anything themselves? Get involved?
Not to. Might have probably done a bit of Charlie, a bit of cocaine, probably mushrooms, cannabis, alcohol, but certainly not. They're not addicts. Not everyone's an addict. Not everyone who's dependent on drugs is an addict either. They're just dependent. I think, which is weird to think about, but...
I wonder if there's any sort of telling factors on somebody, whether or not they could transition to be an addict, or whether or not they've generally not got that in them. How would you know that? By looking at me or Ryan, or interviewing us,
I was called quite sensitive as a kid. I was very shy. I was very introverted. I think my best mate was a dog when I was younger. I could see signs back then. So my first addiction was food. It's the one I'm left with, right? But it was computer games as well. Starting off early, it was like I've just rebought the computer of my youth. I was still in there, so I just bought like a Sinclair 48K. And running all the old games but I was really hooked on those games and obsessing about them. Even when I wasn't playing them, there's another definition of addiction for me. Even when I wasn't playing those games, I was thinking about playing those games. So even when I wasn't taking heroin, I was thinking about taking heroin. Even when I was smoking heroin at the time, I was thinking about the next one. I couldn't enjoy the one I had in front of me because I was thinking, right, well, where's the next one coming from? But it was the same. Those telling signatures of like eating all my sister's chocolate, at Easter or something like that. Or like my nan send a parcel over, demolish it. And I knew I'd get in trouble. thought, as long as I'd had it, it'd be all right. Computer games, a little bit later, before alcohol even, it was gambling. Only 2p machines in the arcade, but we all went down there with our dinner money at lunchtime from school, and we all put all of our dinner money in the slots. And we did that every day for quite a long time, and so there are those kind of tells.
It's really interesting. I feel like you're describing me right now.
Really?
I honestly, I tick all those boxes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Computer games, food.
All or nothing.
All or nothing. I once quit my job, quit everything, so I could go out and kite surf every day. And I spent 2 years training to be an international kite surfing instructor. And then once the money actually ran out, I was like, I'm going to have to actually go back to work now. And
doesn't matter what it was, Ryan, if I liked it, I'd kick the arse out of it until it kicked the arse out of me. And that's everything across the board. I still do it now with work, I suppose, and gym and whatever else. I don't think it goes away. I just think it becomes less destructive. Those early tells for me, I can look back and think, I was born an addict.
that's really interesting. Yeah.
I was a born addict. There was never a time where I wasn't obsessed over something.
So I suppose in one way what you're trying to say is, if you notice those signs within yourself, if you have an addictive personality anyway, whether it's gaming, drinking, socializing, whatever it could be, you might want to be a little bit cautious around taking anything or exploring anything that might be destructive, like heroin, cocaine, cannabis, any of those sort of gateway things as well.
I think it's a perfect storm. Those kind of traits that we share, but also the introvertedness and always trying to feed something, always feeling like always looking for like an external fix kind of thing. I'll get a hit just clicking something on Amazon. And that's why these little, like bingo games are so addictive and stuff like that. We're making films at the moment about gamblers. And there's a correlation between, and we interviewed some gamblers, and they said, well, with your drug, you can see it, you can see what you're taking. The chemicals that are producing those neurotransmitters, they're physically there. With gambling or impulse buying, you're having those same chemicals reactions, those neurotransmitters, those reward centers are being activated, just that you can't see the drug. I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, I think addiction can get you even if you don't have those traits. I think you can find those traits, but I'm sure, be true to yourself. If you know that how easily you get hooked on stuff, for sure. Because it does happen to you. Because I never thought it'd happen to me, and it bloody did. And it happened to a lot of my friends. And a lot of my friends didn't make it out alive either.
So, the turning point of recovery, how did you recover?
I tried a lot of times before, but I never really had any success at it. I had geographicals where you go to different countries, try and get clean and stuff like that, different areas. I've done a couple of rehabs, multiple detoxes, lots of in the community stuff and all the treatments that I spoke about earlier. I've got a friend called Tony Ormond, and he's in recovery too. And he got to he got to sit on the area planning board, which funds a lot of treatment for addiction in North Wales. And he came and found me wherever I was in a doorway, or if I'd done a jail sentence, he'd write to me, and he kept saying he wanted me just to write down what my day looked like at that point, not to embroider it, make it worse. Just what's your day look like today? And I got to the point with North Wales services, drug and alcohol services, that they wouldn't engage me with me anymore because I was prolific. It's just not worth putting the time into me because I was going to die, and there was just no point. I was unmanageable. I was a nightmare for them. And he kept coming to find me, and I had to document, or he'd get in touch, and I'd have to go to the library and just write where I was at that day. I didn't realise it at the time, but he was collecting, he'd made me a case study, him and another guy called Adrian, a friend, because they wouldn't give me funding for rehab because I was a lost cause. There's no point putting 30 grand into someone who's going to walk out and use. So they made me a case study, and my code name was Little Brother. I didn't know this at the time, and they were getting enough evidence to prove to the area planning board that this man's going to die without an intervention. I didn't know this. I didn't think I was that bad, but apparently I was really bad. But you minimise stuff when you're in addiction. Oh, it's not that bad. You know, living in a box, that's not that bad. Eventually, they gave Little Brother 3 months in rehab, a good rehab, a rehab staffed by other people in recovery. That I couldn't bullshit. I couldn't wrap around my finger. I couldn't get away with anything because they knew it. They'd done it, and I did 3 months. I remember going in there, and there's a guy called Jimmy, an old Scouser, rah, rah, rah. And he'd gone in the day before me, and he was on an oxygen tank at CLPD because he didn't burn his foil. And he'd done a day clean, and I was in awe of him because he'd done 24 hours clean. I was like, wow, how do you do that? And they asked me at the door, what do you want? What do you want out of this? They just show me how to stay clean for a day. And I got through a day. I got through a couple of days. I made it up to a week, and that carried on to a month. And I managed to get 3 months. And then the area planning board found out it was me, and they threw the next 3 months' money at me just to keep me out of their way, just to keep me in a bin, just to keep me out of the chaos and the chaos I was causing. And I did 6 months in the end. And because for me, we need everybody in recovery services, but for me, it really worked that I was being counselled, mentored, and befriended by other people in recovery because I had so many questions, and they showed me. I had my whole life. I've had family, police, prison officers, probation, friends, judges, solicitors, all telling me how to get clean, how to stay clean. And then I found a rehab, and the people in there showed me by example, because they'd done worse things than me. I'd done worse things than them. We were on a par. They had lived the same life I'd lived, just different areas and different people in it. And that was the breakthrough for me. That, coupled with a 12-step program of recovery. 10 years ago, I've got a SMAC app.
You got a what?
SMAC app.
What the hell's a SMAC app? Should you be on that?
It's actually a quit smoking app,
Yeah.
but I've changed the figures to represent my habit. So it's not very good for radio, but it tells me that I'm 3,848 days clean. I've not smoked or injected 115,436 bags of heroin and crack. And that has saved me £1.15436 million.
Whoa.
Wow.
Or it saved the people in your life.
Other people, yeah. So, yeah.
It's probably saved the state about £3 million in recovery fees.
And ambulances and prison sentences and police, and that's how much an addict costs. Yeah. But when an addict gets into recovery, that's all given back. The community get back that.
Hence the conversation you were having here today.
Yeah, eternal, yeah.
How do you feel life could have been without addiction?
That's a sliding doors question. Have you ever seen that film? I don't know, kind of, I'd like to say have a wonderful house and a wonderful family and a wonderful job. Might not have. Might be dead. Might have, I don't know. It's not worth dwelling on that question for me because I'm very happy nowadays where I am. And it's taken a lot of work to get here. And I value it. I really value it. Because I've had no life, because I've had a really horrible, horrible, horrible life, like really horrible, I'm really happy now. Even with the little things in life, I'm like so made up. Roof over my head. Like I'm not hungry. I don't have to go and score tonight. I don't have to go and rob something. I don't have to go and deal. I don't have to deal with people. I can choose I can choose who I have in my life nowadays. It's up to me who's in my life, not because I need something out of them or they're manipulating me or I'm manipulating them. So where would I have been? I don't know. Would I be happy? I don't know. But it got me out of my hometown, and I'm glad it did that. But it was a very, very expensive price to pay. 25 years and 3 mil. It's a very expensive price, and that's just me. That's not my family or the general public.
What sort of advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh God, I wouldn't have taken it anyway.
No, I know, but how would you even bother trying to communicate with your younger self to change that outcome? If
I think I would have said, be kinder to yourself. I think that's all you could say, because it's not going to be like, don't try that heroin, you'd be hooked. Because I wouldn't believe me. I'd be like, yeah, I might not be. Yeah, but I might not.
Okay, let's change it up a little bit. How about you're speaking to a young person like Ryan here. Ryan's curious about trying something. Might not be heroin, might not be cocaine, it might just be cannabis, it might be ecstasy, it might be something not quite as heavy as some of those worser ones. What would your advice be, knowing damn well that they're probably going to try it anyway?
Yeah.
You know, would there be any sort of word of warning, bit of advice, like how could you help people safely understand the risks associated to that path without feeling like you're condescending or trying to over-mother them or anything like that? You're just trying to give them the facts.
Yeah, I mean, no one starts out on the hard drugs. I think out of all the films I've ever made, all the interviews I've interviewed people in, I've met one person that went straight to heroin. And that's just because her boyfriend was on it, an older boyfriend, and she went straight onto that. But it's not where we start. It's the little things. And I think there's that old kind of stereotype that dealers give us drugs, pushers. We get drugs pushed on us. Bloody don't. Our mates give it us. It's our friends who give us drugs at that age. It's not drug dealers. It's our friends. What's the advice? What can you afford to lose? Equally, I had a bloody great time. The clubbing scene for me was, I wouldn't change a day. I'm glad I did every single day. I just took it too far. When I crossed the line we'd all drawn in the sand, which was addictive substances, like heroin and even cocaine was too far looking back at it, really. And it's very kind of household now, isn't it? But even cocaine was really crossing the line. I don't know what the advice is. If you do end up taking it that far, which a lot of people do, it's realising as soon as you can that it's happening. Having that awareness, but it might be too late by then as well. I don't know. That's not good advice, I suppose. But
it's a really tough question.
Because it's going to do it anyway. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it. The advice is, I don't know. Because we're going to do it for the friends. So I don't have to say that, do I? Kind of don't do it on your own.
I suppose one of the things that it might be worth considering is, consider the people around you and consider whether or not they are actually your friends. So if I think a little bit about my childhood, I spent a lot of time with a lot of people that took a lot of drugs, and there was always a fair bit of encouragement for me to partake. Now, I recognise that I have a very addictive personality. I always have done, and I've always been very scared of going down that road because I didn't trust myself. My father grew up with addiction, and I knew that I would probably go down that road myself. And so I often excluded myself from partaking in the drugs, although I never excluded myself from those friendship circles. What I quickly found over maybe a course of less than 6 months was I was actively excluded by them because I was not on the same level as them. I wasn't willing to take the same things they took. I wasn't willing to drink when they drank. I wasn't willing to get high when they got high. And I wasn't judgmental by any means, but because it wasn't the scene for me, I was almost painted as the enemy, and friends that I thought were my best friends were beating the shit out of me, at certain points, and it's like, oh my God, I stuck up for you. I put my head up for you, and this is how you treat me. They were never my friends. They were friends to the drugs.
I think it's back to awareness. You had awareness about yourself, and you had awareness that they weren't particularly friends. Now, a big reason why people start on drugs is peer pressure, right? And acceptance by the people that are doing it, right? Acceptance was a huge one for me. It's probably the reason. If there was a holy grail of why I started taking, it was to be accepted, I really guess, that into something. Like we all, feel like we need to belong because we're built that way, kind of tribal. I guess the advice I'd have is you are enough. You don't need to be accepted. You already are accepted. You might just be with the wrong people. Maybe it's that.
It's not an easy question to answer. I think if we could answer that, we could probably save a lot more people. It's one to think about, perhaps.
It's taking the cool out of it, isn't it? It's like how, because it's really not cool at the end. It's not cool at the middle. It's not cool at the end of the beginning. It's really bloody horrible. And if we carry on, we all end up there. It's not something that doesn't happen to everyone. It does happen to a lot of people. And sadly, a lot of people listening to this right now will become addicted. They will become addicted to the hard stuff, the soft stuff, and it will take them to all the horrible places it's taken me. The reason why we're doing these podcasts is to try and give people awareness that it can happen, and it does happen to people that you wouldn't think it would happen to.
What's life like today for you?
I'm happy, Ryan. I've got good people around me that have helped me build something amazing called Eternal Media. One thing addiction did do for me was help me recognise opportunities and grab them, and that's what I've done. And I found the best people, and when I had no credibility, when I was coming out of addiction, coming into recovery, didn't have any credibility, and I found people that would lend me theirs. Got my family back in my life. Everything that was taken, I've got back. And more so, because I appreciate it a lot more nowadays. Yeah, it's the little things. I have amazing friends, I have amazing colleagues, I have fantastic boards and trustees and clients and people I get to do this for a living. I love it. Mm-hmm. We are making a difference. But I wish I hadn't had to go through 25 years to get here. I'm just glad I found my return ticket from hell. Okay, well, we're going to switch sides on you now, Ryan. You've grilled me for like a couple of hours. Carlos had a go as well. How was it for you? How was that, interviewing someone in recovery?
Do you know what? I will be honest, I was a bit nervous at the start because of all the stories and stuff. Now that I've listened and thought about it, you've made me realise that a young person can change just by not taking anything that is addictive, and if they do think of the consequences, lose family, friends, even pets. I mean, I've got a young brother and sister, and if I was addicted to something, I would lose their trust, I would lose their honesty, I would lose everything from them because they mean so much to me. And they both got hidden disabilities, ASD, ADHD. I probably have ASD with anything like that. But they look up to me so much because I'm their role model. And if that ever happened to me, I would literally just curl up and bawl and cry because they mean so much. And my parents as well, they've been there for me for ever and ever, and they will be. And even grandparents as well. I know a couple of them have passed away, but they're still there. They'll be with me in my heart, and I love them to bits.
It's amazing. I nearly cried then. When I said before about the advice, and one of the advice was, what can you afford to lose? I didn't mean money. I meant, what can you afford to lose? Because drugs take everything. You can have drugs, or you can have what you've got. You can't have both. And you've got a lot to lose there. Is that for you, Carlos?
Really, really interesting. I've found it incredibly moving, your story. And I'm particularly interested to have more conversations off air, to be perfectly honest. I think I've still got loads of questions that I would love to ask and talk about and delve into. I'm super curious about how you went down certain paths and how you've come out of it in certain ways. And there's people in my life who I've mentioned off air who are going through recovery themselves at the moment, in very, very early stages of that. And I'm trying to be there to support them too. So some of those learnings too is definitely going to help me in my personal life.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to have those conversations. There's another podcasting series we did with my story on there. You made me go first, didn't you? Got that one.
I also have a friend who's addicted to gambling.
Yeah.
Really, really bad. Really bad one. Well, he'd probably be interested in doing. He's got an active addiction. He's not trying to recover. He wastes everything, literally everything.
It's all the same thread, isn't it? It's all the same. Addiction's addiction.
He robs from where he works, so to pay for his addiction, he steals from the people in his life. He gets a windfall, wins 20, 30 grand, and he goes, right, that's going to be my deposit for a house, because he lives rent free where he works right now. And then within a month it's gone. Yeah. And he can't afford to MOT his banger of a car.
Probably didn't start like that, did he? Probably started with a couple of fruities, a little bit of this, and the same with drug addiction. You start with the really small stuff and maybe rob a £5 or a £1 or something here and there, and it just all escalates. And it's all that progression. Hey, thank you very much for being a part of the series. Ryan, thank you so much. Honestly,
No, thank you.
I actually really enjoyed it, and you made me think a lot about the early days and how my family came into that, and kind of how my addiction affected them, and how very quickly drugs weren't fun. How quickly, and I didn't really notice. By the time I noticed, you made me realise, by the time I noticed I was addicted, it was too late. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for listening to this episode. Please join us next time, where Lowry will be talking about her addiction. Lowry is a lot closer to the age of the guys that interviewed her, so it makes her a really interesting listen.